All right, so Flipform Think Tank here. JP Garcia again with Jonathan Hamlin. Round 2 with Curiosity Sparks podcast, hosted on the Flipform Think Tank. So thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I've heard on LinkedIn, you can see if you're not following Jonathan on LinkedIn, follow him. He was just at a summit doing a bunch of podcasts. Out in the Deepwater conference, right?
Yeah, it was a Deepwater Technical Symposium. It was very interesting. New Orleans. Mm-hmm. A lot of interesting topics to cover, a lot of interesting technology. Mm-hmm. Man, the technology that it takes to get to the deep water and ultra deep water is actually it's more impressive than people think, and there's a lot more safety factors put into it than I think a lot of people really give a nod to.
Sure. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, you and I are both in oil and gas, have been around oil and gas for a long time, right? Yeah. I mean, if you think about just the amount of pressure that something like this has to be able to take to get down to the surface, like let alone start to drill into the earth, right? But, how many millions of gallons of water are sitting on top of these pieces of equipment, and they have to function properly in those environments so that the rigs don't blow up or, something terrible happens, right? Yeah.
And then the sensors that are along the pieces of equipment that are sending data back. I mean, when you think of the pressure that we're talking about, everyone thinks of the large bulk steel, but I'm thinking of the tiny pieces that have to be able to take 10,000 plus PSI and still function and send signals back up top. I mean, that's a big deal.
Well, I mean, imagine just the cabling that has to go down there, right? Exactly. I mean, how do you protect Cat 5 to operate in, 10,000 PSI, right? Underwater, right? So you have to keep it where it can't be corroded and all that stuff. I'm deep diving where we don't need to deep dive.
We could spin off. We should just do one of those episodes too, where we just start to talk about some of that technology. But yeah, it was a great experience, and I got to sit with the Oil and Gas Global Network, the Energy Trade Show podcast, and so we'll have some of those coming out too.
Okay, great.
Some interesting stuff.
Well, there you go. So we, we'll have a lot of good content coming up here soon about all of that stuff. I think talking off air, a lot of that's very interesting, and maybe there's a way we can participate as, a member of OGGN or something like that. I don't know what that looks like, but it may be something to explore for sure.
For sure.
So today you have brought in a set of tools that you have to help with employee improvement, right? And, off air, I kind of called it a coaching guide, but you started the conversation like, well, if you think this is just a guide for coaches, then you're looking at this thing the wrong way. So you want to explain what you have there?
Yeah. Well, first I want to take a step back and say, so our first conversation, was about making that decision.
Right.
I want to be better. I want to go after this. And we talked about it from a standpoint of where maybe I want to be a leader who goes off and does things better, or maybe I just want to be the person in the team that starts the transition and wants to have conversations differently.
Right.
And so natural progression would be, what are the next set of tools for somebody to do that? If they're a leader, if they're not a leader, if they're someone in the team. And so the reason I say it can't just be considered a coaching model is because exactly, like I said, my buddy Elias Donovan always says, the ability to tell someone that their baby is ugly without telling them that their baby is ugly.
Right.
And we use the same conversation in project management all the time, because that's what you're doing with your risk management, going back to the stakeholders a lot of times. And so in order to be able to tell someone that and tell them comfortably and how to get into that conversation, these are tools that I've extracted over the course of many different programs and things like that, that really help those conversations. So it is called a coaching model when you think of things like setting expectations and then accountability and then having feedback, all surrounding the word engagement. Because that's what real engagement looks like. But it's a different when you kind of take it outside of the coaching model and you say, okay, well, look, what do I use from this to actually become useful in a conversation? And I talked about it last time, and I kind of foreshadowed last time about accountability, how it's not a bad word.
Yeah.
And that's really the first place I'd start with, is the ability to have an accountability conversation with anyone is key. So
let me ask you this. Like, accountability is such a buzzword, right? To me, like, level set definition here. Accountability basically means, you are on the hook for the stuff that essentially this is your job, and we expect you to do your job, right? Like these are the things we expect you to do, and we also expect you to put effort into doing these things, right? Gross generalization, but that's kind of what accountability means to me, right? Okay. So let's frame here, correct?
I would say accountability is ownership of what you can control and acknowledgement of the things that you can't control, but are still symptoms or results of what you could control.
Sure.
Whether that's good, bad, or neutral, right?
So, and you mentioned that it's kind of this, term that people don't want to throw around a lot. But
they throw it around, but they throw it around with a negative context.
Yeah, why? Why do you think is... Because to me, it doesn't sound negative, right?
Yeah, but you're an eternal optimist.
Well, that's true.
So,
yeah,
that you can't. The picture of the normal person that's hanging over the sink in the bathroom is someone who fears accountability.
Sure.
Because when someone has said it to them, well, we're going to hold that person accountable, and we're going to bring them in, or we're going to light a fire under them. All these buzzwords, all these. I don't know if you watch Corporate Natalie, but all the things that she spoofs on, those things just have a negative context. In the sense that accountability is something that comes up after action has gone sideways or negatively.
Okay.
It's never brought up in a positive.
Right.
And so that's why I think reframing it about, okay, this is about ownership and growth versus ownership and you have to pay the piper for what you did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not, look, and that's a personal perspective. There's so many people who might just disagree and feel differently, but if we only think of accountability in a negative standpoint, that's just a loss opportunity because, this piece we call it giving account or receiving account is thinking through how to have that conversation to get to the end results of what needs to happen.
Right.
So it starts with asking the person when you're giving account for an accountability in the framework that I'm talking about is, so tell me how this went. What went well? What was the best part of that? Or,
Yeah.
Then asking questions like, well, what did we learn? What was a new takeaway that we didn't know about in the process?
Yeah.
So you started with something positive. Like if you go back to the management playbook or any of those fun books, they always talk about, start with positivity, say what's negative, what needs to be fixed, adjusted, and end with positivity.
Right.
So this kind of follows that mantra of start with something positive. Actually force the person to think about what went well because there's always something to learn, right?
Yeah.
We got something out of it, or what we discovered is that we can't do this way. And then the next thing you're going to ask about is kind of drift into naturally for them. Was there an opportunity for any of us to improve? Was there anything that you wish you could have done differently? Or that you would do differently now if you could go back in time.
Right.
And that opens the door right there. That is the door that cracks open. I always say there's going to be a crack in the door. You got to get in there like a cat sneaking through a screen door. Okay?
Right.
You got to use that opportunity to say, okay, well, let's expand on that. Hey, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you said that because, I actually wanted to share some feedback with you. Because I saw that, and I think you're right. I think if you did it a little different, we'd get a better result. Or, hey, you know what? I felt that too. So next time, can I help you with that?
Yeah.
For that, so that it does improve, or so it does go better.
Sure.
And the last part of the account, like giving account framework, is to then talk about a smart action plan. And if you are the manager, or the leader, you want that person to build that smart action plan. Because that's you want the power in the person to go and make those changes and do those things.
Right.
But if you're just talking to a coworker, hey, well, how are we going to do this next time? Because I want to help you.
Right.
My favorite quote was from one of the guys at Max Torque years ago. Was that Glenn Broccolini? He told me, he said, Jonathan, everybody wants to help. They truly want to help because everybody needs help.
Right.
So when you open that door to helping that person and receiving help, they're going to take it.
Yeah.
And so I always thought that was so powerful because he's just so wise and he just says things so clearly. It was a light bulb moment where, you know what, he's right. And when I took that into this framework and I've used it and I've deployed it and I've had other team members use it and I've had other leaders use it, they all come back and say the same thing. Man, this person is so excited. They're so pumped. This is going to be a game changer. And it's not a game changer.
Yeah.
This is everyday life. This is humanity. We all need help with something.
Yeah. No, a couple of things here, right? So one thing I want to back up on before we get too deep into this, right? Because I did take a look at this over here, yesterday, right? How much? So you just said that a lot of times we're reactive, and these types of coaching interventions come in, or however you want to say it, right? But when you're talking to somebody about accountability, and if we're assuming that there's some negative context there, that probably means that people think, okay, well, how can we hold somebody accountable or something like that, right? How much of this is kind of a reaction to maybe poor level setting at the very beginning, right? So, and
Good
we're
point.
saying, it's kind of something I learned in parenting early. Sometimes I figure out, like, the kids do something. It's like, why are you doing this? Where I didn't really ever say, hey, you can do this, but you can't do that. Right. And so for me and my kids, I had to be proactive. It's like, okay, you can do XYZ thing, but here are the boundaries of where you can play in this sandbox. And at least with my kids, for the most part, I mean, kids are kids, but for the most part, if you draw very clear boundaries that, okay, you can do this, but not this. You can do this, but not this. Right. They'll generally stay into that. And so I am curious about how often, we have to put employees or colleagues or whatever you want to call them on some sort of action improvement plan where the true, the true bounds or the true scope of their job was really never understood in the first place.
That's a huge part. You just also said something specifically around children that I want to say.
Okay, let's go.
It correlates, like we said last time. You take the word children out, you talk about employees, or you talk about coworkers. It's the exact same thing. So I had this moment the other day with my teenager where she did something and it was like, you should know that. I'm pretty sure you know that. Why are you doing this?
Right.
Same scenario. And I realized when I explained it to her, and her response is, well, I never actually did that. I explained it to the 3-year-old. And I just assumed by, 14 years old, 15 years old, you would know this. I didn't have to explain this to you.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a humbling moment for myself. But that type of approach, coupled with something you said the other day that I saw that you put out content-wise about, none of us are infallible. We're all susceptible to be wrong. And when we acknowledge that, hey, I can be wrong too, type of moment. I think those are two key attributes right there around assumptions. And in those expectations, I feel like there's a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
So you hit a very big nail where were the expectations laid out for that person? How did they communicate that? Which I think kind of goes back to some of what we talked about in the last conversation, where we originally talked about, having a comms plan, or a communication matrix. I think anyone should, if they have something where they feel like an employee or a team member is not fulfilling the expectations of the job description,
Right.
It's time to reset the table. That's always my approach. So let's have a resetting of the table, because maybe someone's made an assumption.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what I've experienced is so many things have changed that they're not looking at it. And I know you do project management as well. So they're not thinking of it from an agile standpoint.
Right.
They're thinking of it, well, sometimes you're going to have employees that they continue to stick to the script of what they were hired for originally.
Right.
And they don't have an agile mindset.
Right.
So if someone doesn't stop and reset them and say, hey, listen, understood, this though is where we need to go now.
Right.
And here's how that's supposed to play out and what that looks like, what success looks like. So I think you hit a big point there. So that's another piece, is holding people accountable to things that were expected of them, but were they actually given the tools or the information to know that this is what I need to do?
Right. Right. And and the reason why I bring that up is this concept that I think will be important as we discuss this. And it's something that my friend Christina is super passionate about. It's psychological safety and psychological safety in the workplace. And that's very buzzwordy. What does that mean? It is essentially giving folks, whether, they're direct reports to you, leadership, whatever, having everybody feel safe enough around each other to be able to say things where, they may not, if they feel like there's this very huge power dynamic shift between, okay, you're my manager and I'm the employee, blah, blah. I mean, whatever. You insert whatever terminology you want, but I'm the higher up, you're the lower, they're the lower person or whoever is being called that is not going to communicate the same way to the management that they would to their peers or to maybe somebody subordinate to them. Right. And so the idea of psychological safety is kind of breaking those barriers where, just because you're my supervisor doesn't mean that you and I can't just have a conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or that you're the 10-year senior of me. Going back to that conversation about the teenager to the, the 3-year-old is just because that person's been here 10 years longer than this other person, it's really not fair to think.
Yeah.
That we can't have the conversation, but two, that also, is it psychologically the right approach to just assume that they know it because they've been here 10 years longer?
Right.
Unless you are a widget manufacturer and all you do is widgets and nothing ever changes, ever.
Yeah.
That's the only scenario in my mind that's actually okay.
Yeah.
But every other company and organization, something's changing. Something's evolving.
Right.
I mean, go back 3 years to now. AI has changed most people's landscapes rapidly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you look at, even if you go into something like creating axles for a car, right? Axle technology, I'm speaking out of my depth here, but I can't imagine that it's changed that much, right? Because you can get an axle from today, and generally they look the same. They may be made of different material and stuff like that, right? But the point is, they look the same. They operate the same generally, and so I got to think that the manufacturing process for that is probably very similar, But even something like that, now we have AI. Well, okay, let me talk about something that I know a lot about. Okay, bullet manufacturing. So, the process for creating bullets, loaded cartridges that can be shot out of a pistol or a rifle or whatever, that hasn't changed. In the process itself to essentially take a case, put a primer on the bottom, fill it with powder, and drop a projectile on top of it, crimp it, right? That's the process, okay? Hasn't changed since the advent of those cartridges in World War I or whenever it happened. I should know the history. I don't. But what has changed is the amount of quality control around that, So now instead of having to have a physical person look and examine and check to make sure all the stuff is right and caliper and you do all the stuff, right? Now you have AI cameras
Automation.
taking pictures of it all throughout the process and being able to identify whatever cracks in the cases or bullet seated too low, if the bullet has a reverse primer, like all of these things that, it has, even though the process hasn't changed, what's around it is changing. It's always changing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a great point. The tools and techniques have changed.
It always changes.
But the general principle has not.
Right. And so now you imagine that bullet making hasn't changed, other than what I just mentioned, using AI and using all of this stuff now. Imagine if your complete process of how you do things is changing. So anything that was constant in that bullet making process, now you're making that variable also. So you have variable upon variable upon variable, technology improving, techniques improving, and you have employees sitting there, you have people sitting there that are, doing something that maybe have been relevant 6 months ago, right? But now it's not relevant. And going back to psychological safety, a lot of times those people know it, right? I mean, this. People know what's going on, and the people on the ground make the changes to make whatever
get it done.
But do they have the psychological safety to communicate back up the chain to say, hey guys, your process isn't working. We're changing it. A lot of people don't. It just happens. And how many times do you have management come to the field and like, this is how we do it, right? When did we start doing it this way? It's like, well, whenever they started doing this, we started having to do these things, and it's like, if you don't have that communication channel laid out, number one, like you mentioned, the communications is key. But even if you have those channels laid out, if people don't have the psychological safety to be able to say, hey, what you gave us is crap.
Yeah.
We have to do X, Y, and Z thing to get around it to make this thing work. Right. And I'm being vague because you can insert any sort of thing here.
Any story, any product line.
Yeah.
I've been in so many scenarios too, in a situation like that where you have those guys saying it. This is not what we used to do.
Right.
This is what we have to do now in order for this to work, because we changed this part, or we switched from, this piece was Siemens, now we're using this piece and it's Allen Bradley.
Right.
And so we do this. And so I've always been a process person who says, like, let's rewrite the process.
Yeah.
And so you hit some big points there, is the ability to feel comfortable making that conversation. So it's perfect. So I talked about it from a leader standpoint to employees. I talked about it from a coworkers. The one thing I didn't say that you just said that's really brilliant is from an employee up the chain.
Yeah.
Is to go back to the supervisor or lead and say, hey, how do you think this went? What's your thoughts? Do you think it went well? Do you feel like we learned anything? And having that conversation up the ladder is really uncomfortable for most people.
It is.
But I don't have like a one-time fix-all for anybody who's uncomfortable in that, other than the fact that if you don't say what needs to be said, no one's going to say it for you.
Yeah. But I think that Oreo sandwich technique, right? Like that's the way it works both up and down the chain, the air quotes chain.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why the 10-Minute Manager has always still remained one of the best all-time selling books.
Oh yeah.
Even though there's so many other great ones that really get into the meat of it so much better. But going back, to what we were saying there about that conversation and having that accountability in those conversations. Someone said something to me the other day that I thought would be interesting to share with you, to get your opinion.
Okay.
And so it was this person sharing, just really kind of letting out a little bit of venting about what's happening, but also here's a scenario where they're working on this one situation and they're working on this project, and someone comes in at the last minute that was supposed to be involved the entire time and didn't do anything.
Okay.
And really kind of just steps all over everybody's work. Why'd y'all do this? You should have done this. Did you get this done? It's supposed to be here.
Right.
Type of deal. And that person is, take age off the table, just make everyone the same age, make everyone have, everyone on this team was supposed to get to the end result.
Right.
And so afterward, that person had a conversation about this person with their supervisor that's in a different department.
Sure.
And it was, are you going to tell him or am I going to tell him type of conversation? And that supervisor said, well, should we address it now, or what if we just kind of monitor the situation and see if it happens again? And that person telling me a story said, well, I kind of went along with that because, maybe, we're still a young group in the sense of our journey.
Yeah.
And maybe this person, I don't know what they walked in with, et cetera. Similar to what we talked about last time. That person was really being empathetic, trying to say, I don't know what that other person went through.
Right.
They might not have been involved this long because they had something, whatever. Right. And my stance on this is always been very, very clear, is that this is what I told that person. I hear what you're saying, but if I had to coach the team, if I was called in on this one, my stance would be to tell your supervisor to go tell that person's supervisor. That exact statement is either you have a moment with them to coach them on this, or I would like to have a moment to coach them on this.
Right.
Because we want to bring that person with us. And the reason being, because it's easier for that person to make a 1 to 3 degree turn versus you monitor it and then you try to adjust it later. Yeah. And it's a 90 degree turn for that person by that point.
Yeah.
Because that's hard to survive. Yeah. So that's my stance. I'm curious what you think about those type of scenarios.
Yeah, I agree. I subscribe to the notion, or at least I guess the better way to frame it is the way I operate is if I have feedback, I give it to you, right? You'll hear it from me. You know what I mean? So And it a lot of times it may come off as brash or very sharp feedback because it's happening almost in the moment, you know, or as close to the moment as possible as appropriate, right? So, you know, in a consulting context, sometimes you can't give direct coaching intervention or direct feedback while in front of a client. You know what I mean? But, you know, as soon as that call ends, it's like, hey, we got to talk about this. You can't do that in front of a client. And here's why, you know, because they're going to think you're an idiot, and you're not an idiot.
Exactly.
Right. But the way you carried yourself in that, like, it put you in a situation where, you know, you didn't want to be in. Right. So I'm thinking of a specific example in my head, but the point is I tend to favor direct feedback as soon as something happens so that any tweaks can be made, because what I don't want to happen, I don't want to have my consultants out there make the same mistake 5 or 6 times in the same day.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
why not stop it? Why
Yeah.
not help that person? That was my whole point of that
Yeah,
conversation
I agree.
to them was you're leaving that person hanging out there.
And the only time I could see where people would want to just see what happens, 2 things. Okay, if that person doesn't have a history of making those interactions, right? Let's say you have X number of data points, say, okay, 50 times this person did not do that, right? The 51st time it happened. Like, okay, what happened there? Maybe it's a bad day. Okay. Let's see if they're having a bad day or whatever. Maybe I would give somebody the benefit of that, but at the same time, my knee-jerk reaction is like, hey, 50 times you did fine. Like, what happened in this one? You know, what happened here? I would tend to say let's nip it in the bud. Let's give the benefit of the doubt or let's give the benefit of coaching or intervention or conversation to that person immediately so that they can benefit sooner and and improve themselves. Right. Yep. Versus waiting to see. The only time I could see really waiting to see if you're looking to can somebody, right? If you're just trying to document reasons to get rid of somebody, then it's like, okay, well, let them hang themselves.
Which you said something a while ago too. It was about putting someone on an action plan, basically. You know, so and I saw this video the other day that was just the worst advice I've ever heard. It was by someone saying, if a company puts you on a PIP, performance improvement plan,
Right.
You should just play dumb, say yes to whatever they're saying because they're going to give you work to do. That's just addition to your job, and they're really just trying to fire you. So play dumb, say yes, and then go spend your time looking for a new job. It's the worst advice I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Because I've rolled out multiple PIPs before, and the entire reason it was so one-sided in the sense that if you're on the other side of a PIP and you're receiving one, you don't know how much time that manager spent thinking through all the things that you need to improve on. And here's some things that you can actually do to show improvement.
Right.
Working with HR, you know, making all of these things, creating the check-ins ahead of time, and then scheduling all this and laying it out for an employee.
Yeah.
So if you're on the other side and you're watching that advice, you think, yeah, she's probably right. It was horrible advice, because if you're ever done one for someone, your goal and why you would go through that is to just lift that person up and show them they have exactly what's needed. Yeah. I've never seen a company go through the process of a PIP and all of the annoyance and headache just to get rid of someone.
Just to can somebody. They would just can them. Yeah.
And that thing had thousands of likes and hearts. And I was thinking, my gosh, what horrible things that you could study.
It is. But, you know, I understand the sentiment, right? Because a lot of times
it hurts.
And not just that, but sometimes, you know, let's face it, you and I are talking about it in the most optimistic, you know, when you put somebody on a PIP, right? Boom. Okay. You have a reason. You're trying to keep them on track and make sure they're going, right? And we are trying to rely on this person later. We need them to improve now, so that we're trying to we're trying to improve them. Sometimes, you know, you can think about this, right? How many companies have you not worked for? More than you've worked for, right?
Sure.
So
I'm being an eternal optimist. Can I finally say that I'm being an optimist?
Yeah. No, and I think it's part of it. It's just there are companies where, you know, the PIP is the way out, you know? And it's like once you get on it, like, okay, well, there's, you're already circling down the drain.
Yeah, maybe
you know?
there are some managers who put unrealistic expectations inside of one. I've
Yeah.
never seen where a company let that slide.
Yeah. I think,
I think the fastest way to let someone go is to do nothing.
yeah. Well, and that's why I was saying, like, the only reason why you wouldn't intervene on somebody is because you're trying to get rid of them, right? Okay, let them hang themselves. I think, and this may tweak the internet, it may tweak LinkedIn. Sorry, but sometimes I think if the when a manager has to put somebody on a PIP or whatever you call it, right, project or personal improvement plan, right, it's a failure on the manager, right, and people don't see it like that, and I think a lot of times if somebody who gets put on that plan understands that it's not just a deficiency in skill set or work ethic or accountability on your end, it's also a failure on the management side. Hey, I didn't intervene soon enough. I didn't do what I needed to do to get you on a successful path, right? If people knew that there's at least partial to blame for management getting you on that plan, then I think it'd be much more well received. That it's not the road went wrong for both people, not just one person.
I think that's very fair to say, and it's probably appropriate for most case scenarios, because by the time you got there, how many coaching opportunities did you miss? Or how many one-on-ones did you miss?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that example I gave you of go and have that conversation with that person, and so they could potentially make a 1 to 3 degree change in their approach or their style or whatever's happening there versus putting it off, goes right back to, so we talked about expectations, we talked about accountability, and that last piece of that leg was feedback. How many times have you heard of someone getting a one-on-one, right, where they're getting their performance review,
Right.
but that you get a performance review for the prior year, and somewhere in Q1, if you're lucky, of the following year, you might not get it till the beginning of Q2.
Right.
So think of that mindset, which is why most companies try to get away from performance reviews.
Yeah.
And they try to go to more regularly scheduled one-on-ones.
Sure.
And I've heard so many people say it's not realistic. I think it's 1,000% realistic, because the alternative is, and I've experienced this personally, where I have someone who gave me a performance review in the middle of the year for the prior year.
Yeah.
That person only had 5 things on it. They were very well written. It was things like, these are some things you could improve upon in this scenario.
Yeah.
Well, that specific scenario of one of them happened in January the prior year. So we're talking about 18 months prior.
Yeah. Yeah.
We waited 18 months to talk to me about this.
Right.
I've handled 6 other situations just like it. I handled the next 6 a little different every time because they're situational. But I just think about the fact that actually happens more often than it should.
Yeah.
And so when we don't do it more real time in a framework that's just in these one-on-ones and you wait, that's how these PIPs actually come to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you had an opportunity to have a real rapid one-on-one with that person. And just like we talked about last time, it doesn't have to be formal. They don't have to sit at a desk. Let's go to lunch.
Yeah.
Let's open that door. Just like we talked about last time, let's have some empathy, hear about what's going on in that person's life. What are the factors? Understand what led to that response, and then steer it back to, okay, here's the expectations piece again.
Right.
That's why when you look at a visual of it, it's expectations, accountability, and feedback, and it's in a circle because that's the loop you got to live in.
Yeah.
For anybody that's in a cohesive team, so it doesn't matter if they're to the right of you, or they're above you, or they're below you. It has to be in that circle, and it has to be alive.
Yeah.
So
I agree. Yeah, and I think the idea of doing a performance review on somebody 18 months after the fact, right? This is now I'm going to put on my nerd hat, right? This is doing waterfall performance reviews versus doing agile performance reviews, right? The difference being, so if you look at project management as just as a whole, right? There's the waterfall versus agile approach, right? And people him and haw about that, but the advantage of agile becomes clear when you look at how waterfall works, right? So waterfall, you take a lot of time ironing out a certain amount of scope, then at that scope period ends, and then you go through this certain implementation time, right? After that, boom, you do testing and then you release whatever it is, right? Doesn't matter. It could be software, it could be hardware, it could be, we see it in oil and gas all the time, right?
All the time.
So then what happens? So at the end of implementation, almost without fail, is that the requirements that we recorded 6 to 10 months ago are no longer relevant to what we delivered today, right? And the reason why they're not relevant is because the feedback loop closed, and then we went into a cave for 1 to 6 months, a year, however long, right? It's the same thing with these performance reviews, So when you had that performance review, when were those metrics set for you? They had to have been set the year before, right? And so now the time period for implementation happened. Now there's this action, after action review, and they're telling you, hey, you know what? 6 months ago, you didn't perform the way you were supposed to on those metrics that we set for you 18 months ago. And it's like, hey, would have been nice if you would have told me 6 months ago that I was off track, and I could have course corrected so we wouldn't have this conversation, So that's more of the Agile methodology, where you have shorter implementation cycles, you have shorter evaluation cycles, and you get more constant feedback, and you can turn the ship left, right, up, down, however you need to go, whether it's your management, whether it's your peer, or whether it's your subordinate, right? You can have those conversations. The more often you have them, the better off you are. Does that make sense?
I agree. There's no way around that. The more conversations, which I get it. There are so many different situations that we're talking about, and we're kind of glazing it. And there's so many managers who will tell you, well, look, I have this many employees. I can't have this many type of conversations.
Yeah.
And I would say that's not true, because we're not talking about something that's unattainable. A 15-minute conversation with a person, when you use some of these tools and techniques that I'm talking about, where you use a structure to the conversation,
right,
and you focus. That's how you capitalize on those things. Going back to what we talked about in the communication matrix, right? Like not letting people just steer the conversation. Yes, it's great to hear about their kids. You do want to have some personal connection with them,
right?
Whether it's a coworker, or it's a boss, or it's an employee of yours, but you do need to make the conversation relevant. So it was so funny. I actually had when I worked for Canes. Raising Canes, right? And we joked about that because I don't fit in my polos anymore.
Yeah.
The fact that I actually had, that was one of my reviews. Okay. So I had a manager give me a review, and it was about, you need to keep the conversation relevant to work in your shift, in your crew.
Okay.
Because at some point I found you having a conversation that wasn't relevant to work.
Okay.
It was very, very interesting review for me, because I was always the boring person who only
talked about work.
I'm talking about, hey, if we did this, we could do this better. And it's so funny, because that exact shift, I had an employee that, and I didn't bring this up because there's no reason to make throwaway comments in these moments, right?
Right.
But I had an employee bring it up to me about this manager who came in to do this review. He just keeps talking to me about my car and about my life, and like I just want to do my job. Do I have to talk to this person?
Yeah.
I remember telling him, thank you. Thank you.
Right.
First off, thank you for telling me. Thank you for being patient with him. I understand. Like, this person just came in for this review of me.
Right.
It's not you.
Right.
He or she, whatever. They're not against you. Just keep doing what you're doing because you're great. It was a great employee.
Sure.
But it was so funny because here's that review comment was made to me on that same day. And here's that person who did it to this person. Like, people don't realize, people don't think and I didn't hold it against that person. I think he was doing what he was supposed to do in building connections with people.
Yeah.
That person didn't want a connection with him.
Right.
And he apparently heard me say something that he didn't want to hear. That's fine. You know what I mean?
That's normal. Yeah.
Like you said, like we talked about earlier, I'm not infallible. So who knows? Maybe that conversation went a minute too long. Whatever. I know that, and I took that as a sense of how am I going to shape these conversations going forward? How am I going to do this better? Because I do want to build a connection with this team, but I cannot let that steer us into spin-offs. Like, I don't need to know what they drive. I don't need to talk about, those type of things.
Yeah.
And so the feedback is good. You got to chew the meat and spit out the bones. A friend of mine, Mark Miller, always told me that. You got to chew the meat and spit out the bones. Okay. So take what's good from what's there and find a way to use it. I actually heard something interesting the other day. It said, if you're either winning or learning,
I've heard that. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're not learning, that's the only way that you truly lost.
Yeah.
And I had never heard it put that way. I don't know. I guess I lived under a rock because I've brought it up a couple times. I'm like, I heard that forever ago, and I don't know. I was in a cave.
I think, some of this is like, how do I want to say this? It was, my guess is that it took a form that we're familiar with earlier on, and it's been chewed up and reframed to us now as that, right? But it's true. I mean, I like the sentiment that, in every loss or in every failure, there's an opportunity to learn, you know? And so, and I think it gets back to something we talked about earlier, maybe even last time we talked, that failure is not a bad thing, right? Failure is going to happen. And I was talking to somebody, old client, and, we kind of had this discussion about, going back to the Agile conversation, right? I was trying to promote why, shortening, release cycles and blah, 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 it wasn't actually for software. It was for something oil and gas related, but shortening those cycles and making them happen more often actually put out a better product. And I said a trigger word, right? Because this guy was a continuous improvement guy. And like, you should love Agile, right? Because or Agile methodologies, because it allows you to fail much faster. And he said, well, we don't want to fail at all. And I was like, you are going to fail. Failure will happen. You can't get around it. The sooner you fail and learn from it, the better off you will be. Like, he's like, well, that's why we have to take so much time and analyze, before we do something. It's like, analysis is correct. You need to do it. But again, if you spend 8 months analyzing something that takes 15 minutes to do or something like that, right? I'm grossly generalizing here, but you're going to miss the boat, right? Like, you're going to fail because you either missed the window or you missed the requirement. The requirements change, right? What happens when the requirements change on this? It's like, well, the requirements shouldn't change. It's like, this is the real world, you know? What happens if we're not drilling on this side of the basin, we're drilling on that side where the soil is different and the depth is different, the pressures are different, right? Everything changes, and that decision between this plot and that plot has nothing to do necessarily with what's the product underneath of it. It has more to do with legal saying, hey, we can't get a lease over here. We have to go over here, So you can't keep taking the same requirements over here and then just copy paste them and put them over there. It's like, you got to be able to change.
It's interesting that it was a trigger word for him, failure.
Yeah.
Anytime someone is afraid of failure, in my mind, I hear in my mind, like, I hear Dr. Brene Brown's voice. Okay.
Yeah.
About perfection is the 20-ton shield that no one can hold up. The shield that we try to hold to hide from shame, blame, judgment, and criticism. That's what perfection is.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you and I have both worked in processes and manufacturing settings where, yes, we should be able to get the exact same every time. That's why we have processes. That's why we build in control systems, that are saying, oh, the humidity level is this. So now we go to this setting. And when the humidity rises, we go to this setting.
Right.
Because we want the same output. But that's also, and this is the one communication piece I use to get across to all engineers who are very, about this, is that's why there's a tolerance.
Yeah.
And so I always say that to everybody, there's a tolerance. There has to be a tolerance. If there was no tolerance, you are trying for perfection.
Right.
And that's why there's a tolerance on literally everything. This microphone has plus and minuses of the bottom to the top,
right,
to the screws. Like, nothing is in a perfect design in a perfect world.
Right.
So it's so interesting that triggered him from a continuous improvement standpoint, because that's the whole goal.
But it was like a throwback to old school thinking.
Yeah.
Right. Where more analysis and less action will get you better results. And I think in practice,
action gets you more results.
Action gets you more results, right? You learn from the action, right? And so I'm not saying to go be cavalier, right? Going back to oil and gas, you can only pour casing once, right? Once the cement's dried, you're done, you know? So I will be the first one to tell you, you know, the amount of analysis that you put into, you know, the specifications for casing on a, you know, on a well are but probably different than the amount of specification you need for changing functionality on a website that's live, right? You can make mistakes and rewind mistakes in software much more easily than you can undo. You can't control Z dried concrete, right?
But no, you can't.
But at the same time,
you'd like to.
Yeah, you would like to. There are plenty of times, right? So, you know, so at sometimes more analysis is required, right? Like, I'm not saying that, but, you know, to push off decisions or to continue to kind of this wait and see, or more analysis will more educate us. At some point, it's like, hey guys, let's take a real look at what's happening. And a lot of it, you know, is, hey, let's talk to the guys on the ground, or let's talk to management, or let's talk to figure out, like, I feel like we're spinning a lot of wheels here without taking a lot of action. You know, why is this warranted? You know, we have to have some honesty in examining the process. And a lot of times too, process is almost like heirlooms in a company. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
We just, hey, we do this because we've always done this because we're XYZ company and this is what we do. It's like, yeah, but is it better? You know, are we improving? Is this giving us a competitive advantage? Are we able to meet the market demand quicker because of this process? If so, then maybe we keep it. But if not, if we just do it because it's the way we've always done it, then it also needs to be on the table to be chopped up and changed and all of this stuff. And I think it's the same way with HR when we're looking at employees and giving feedback and doing this. A lot of that stuff is, you know, is heirloom stuff that came from this, you know, the 60s and 70s for how people manage other people, you know? And
I think that's that's a huge point. I actually had a conversation with Anna Guichard from SLB at the Deepwater a few weeks ago. And we were just, you know, catching up basically about the fact I used to work for Cameron, and that was one of my favorite quotes, that exact one. It was on a big board in one of the main conference rooms, and it says, because we've always done it that way, and it had the big red circle and the red line across it. Yeah. Because that was part of the continuous improvement mindset. You know, they're real big on success and, yeah, you know, working the problem. We had 3 or 4 black belts at all time. But I just thought it was so fundamental for everyone coming in, because there are going to be those things that just keep handing down, right? Yeah. And it's something that obviously impacted my career, because I rewrote that on every conference room. Yeah. At the beginning of almost every project. Absolutely. That I've ever been a part of, is because that's what has to happen. And that has to happen outside of process. Like, we're talking about process, or we're talking about this. That goes for everything. You know? Well, we've always just kind of, you know, let these type of things happen with employees. Right. Well, we can't. Yeah. We, you know, if it's wrong, it's wrong. Yeah. I've had a surprising number of calls from some people in certain organizations recently, and they're not all the same one, talking about racism. You know, that's been allowed to be naturalized in conversation.
Geez, can't let that happen.
And it like, when I tell you I get hot, like I physically get warm, because it's so upsetting and frustrating to me. And it's because, well, these things have been allowed to happen. And so it's become normalized. And, you know, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to adjust this? And, or even worse is, you know, the top tier knows about it and nothing's happening. Right. Because you know, it's okay right now, because there's no reason to make any changes. And I often go back, and I shared something I had learned last time about where, you know, one of my prior bosses taught me that if you're not going to swap out more than one, you often don't make the change at all because of the cost. Right. You know, kind of going back to that process. If you have a team full of B players and you think, well, this one's causing the problem, you pull the B out, you drop an A, because you think you'll get an A there. Right. That A is not going to cause all the B's to become A's. Correct. The likelihood is the B's cause that A to drop down to a B. Right. Yeah, or lower. Or that A, like you said, is going to be like, why the hell am I here? Yeah. I got to leave. I got to get out of here. Yeah. And so in those conversations with those people, you know, I encourage them to have these exact conversations of accountability and to really start talking about, okay, but how are we going to change this? You know, do you feel like that's okay? Is there an opportunity to make a change here?
Right.
Can we do this together? Can I help you change? What's the action plan for us to make that? And it's such a hard one for me. That one just hits me right in the chest, because there's no reason in 2025.
Yeah.
You know, a few years ago, my sister, she would always joke when the movie Barbie came out, and her catchphrase that year was, "Really, the year of the Barbie? You're still doing this?" And, and so that's what I hear in my head is that, really, after the Barbie movie, we're still doing this?
We're still doing this.
Like, just come on, guys. Because it's not just racism, it's sexism, it's all of those isms,
all of that stuff. Yeah.
That just don't belong in anyone's circle, much less in a professional setting where you're really actually trying to get everyone to go in the same direction.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's one of those things too, that you can't, it's even worse, I think, than having, somebody, whether manager, report, somebody, a direct report, something like that, if you don't hit that type of stuff immediately, you can't let it go, it's not okay, and one of the things that I do
destroys culture quick.
It does. Yeah. Well, and I understand where people would say, well, we got to let it go. This is, the old boys will be old boys. I was like, yeah, but we can't have like in the age of the internet and everything being recorded and stuff like that, just if you're a manager and you're hearing this and you have this situation in your organization, you're letting it go. Just think about who has their phone recording things, like taking notes. There are a lot of people innocuously just taking notes. Like they have their AI note taker listening to things. And it's like if it picks up on something, like that, like a racist, sexist, comment, whatever, insert inflammatory comment here, right? And that makes it public. It's like, that's going to torpedo your company. Like, forget the fact that it's going to kill any rapport you have within your company with the people who are being, targeted with those types of, racist or whatever things or statements. If that gets out about your company's done. Companies have been canceled for less, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's true. You said something about the good old boys and things like that. That made me think of situations where I was on a team. And someone that was, one case it was a customer, another case it was a senior member of the team in a different location.
Sure.
And in both of those scenarios, they felt it was okay to say things derogatory about my team members.
Okay.
Right. And in one scenario, it was a customer. Like I said, I told him, listen, if you say this again, I'm hanging up the phone. Like, it's gonna stop.
Right.
And I had a coworker sitting right next to me that, he's an engineer and he's having to hear this, and that person's really saying stuff about him,
right? And
the rest of the team, because I was just in the sales team.
I'm
clearly not part of the actual get it done team. Right. I'm just trying to steer it. And that person just kept going, and I remember hanging up the phone, and that engineer just looked at me. You just hung up on a customer. I said yes, and I would hang up on anybody who would say that about this team.
Right.
Anyone.
Yeah.
This is just not acceptable.
Yeah, feedback's one thing.
Yeah.
But
and I remember
there's a line to be crossed there.
I remember the look on his face, and he's like, "Man, you're gonna get it. Like, it's gonna." And
you're not gonna get anything.
I you know what? I did get it. They came back and they said, "Hey, this customer said you hung up on him." I said, yeah, I will hang up on every customer that cusses out our team or says derogatory or hateful things about them. You can put it in the report. I'll sign it. Let's get that done. Let's get that on record.
Sure.
Because it's going to happen every time someone does it.
Right.
And the other time, that other story that came to mind was, the senior guy in another location. And he really was literally calling certain people on the team just dumb and like cursing about them. And I remember telling a person, if you keep going, I'm hanging up. Like, and he's on speaker at this point.
Right.
Because I need some witnesses here.
You need documentation.
And so kept going. I was like, all right, goodbye. I hung up on it. And that person, I remember when my supervisor came to me like, this person's pretty high up. You can't just hang up on them. And
he can't just talk shit about my people.
This person just really, and I named some names. He's like, it doesn't matter. They're this high up the chain. And I said, well, then we have a different problem here. And I'll never forget our executive assistant came in and was like, to be fair, very cheeky, to be fair, he did warn that person 3 times to stop saying it.
Yeah.
It was just like, I could have probably warned him 20 times. In that organization, it didn't really matter, because that was the good old boys.
Right.
Which just is like, come on, you know, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So I know we kind of deviated there, but I mean, the reality is these conversations, and I think we probably touched more on some of the harder conversations, but the reality is taking that step, it's worth it in the end. It is always worth it. Doesn't matter who that person is. I think waiting to have a real feedback conversation with somebody that could help them or the team, by waiting, all we're doing is letting that person potentially go down the wrong path.
Yeah, you're hanging them.
And hang themselves or hang the team.
Yeah.
Because what if that person makes a mistake that then causes the entire team to lose a project, or the product to go sideways, or the launch slips? I mean, insert, like you said, anything here. If it's a startup and your project doesn't, or the product doesn't hit the market in time,
right?
Stakeholders will find you.
Oh yeah. No, and it's, going back to that idea of psychological safety.
Yeah.
Right. And having your team members, up or down, right, believe that they can say something. Like it all stems from that type of feedback. If I'm going to give you this feedback, you have to give it back to me, right? I expect you to tell me when I'm wrong. I expect you to tell me when you don't have something, right? A lot of times I can remember a team that I had. They were much earlier in their career than I was, right? And I was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8.
That was the nicest way to just say, I was working with a lot of young people.
Oh, yeah. True. They were young, but that's okay. They had to learn. I had to teach them. Right. So, and when you're starting your career, you don't know, you're just afraid, and, you're not trying to piss off anybody, and I was very senior in comparison, and they were, there was intimidation there, right? And it was very much going the way of the old school, I'm the supervisor, you're the employee thing in their minds. And, I kind of pulled them all together and said, okay, guys, this is how, little education here. This is how you guys get evaluated, right? This is, you're going to have a mid-year, right? And then you're going to have a year end. Okay. And my job here is to, write stuff about you, like good things you've done, bad things you've done. Right. And I told them, said, first off, I want you all to get promoted. Number one, because I can't, essentially, it's like, this is consulting. I can't sell you all as analysts. I have to get you to a certain level where I can sell you as a team, right? So I need you all to get promoted. I need you guys to get promoted. Number 2, all of these mid-years and year ends, I want you guys can write whatever you want in there. I have to sign it and put it in there. Okay. So what I expect of you is I need you to do whatever the client needs, right? And whatever we need to do as a team, we're going to decide whatever that is. I don't know. I can't tell you that today. We don't have a project sitting in front of us. We actually did, but we don't have multiple projects sitting in front of us to tell you what different demands each client's going to have, but I can tell you they're going to be different. And I need you guys to tell me what you need. I need you guys to tell me if a client's being an asshole, right? I need you guys to do what is expected of you, because I'm not going to know all of what the clients are going to ask you to do. Okay. If you do those things, clearly I'm going to, like I said, I promise I'm going to let you write your year end and your mid year. You write them, whatever you want to highlight, the things you did the best. Perfect. Okay. The best case scenario here is that I don't have to add anything, if I'm adding something, it's a good thing, right? And I'm only going to add things that detract from your thing if it's a lie, or if you really didn't do that. You get what I'm saying? So
if they caught a really big fish.
exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, here are the metrics for what gets you to the next level. Like, I want to put you all on this promotion track. Like, there's not just one spot. If I could promote you all today, the spots are available. The budget is available. You can all be the next level. Here's the criteria. Mm-hmm. You have to do X, Y, and Z thing. I want to help you get there. So you have to manage this and put yourselves in situations, or tell me where to put you to get these things. Okay. And so I tell you all of this, and it was much more detailed, mm-hmm. but it was to kind of break down that barrier of I'm deciding mm-hmm. and I'm evaluating. It was more to kind of say, you guys are in control of your trajectory here. I am here to guide and here to redirect and use me as a resource. You guys got to tell me. If you don't tell me, I don't know.
Did they believe you?
Yeah.
They bought in?
They bought in. And so, and it broke down that manager, that mm-hmm. That normal manager direct report relationship where we were all very collegial, and they would tell me things, and they would pull me into very difficult conversations they were having with the client, where they were having similar situations where the client was beating them up and, being inappropriate, and they're, mm-hmm. They're just, kind of like this, come over here. I need you to listen to this. And so versus, a lot of times if you have this normal manager-managee relationship, they're just going to try to eat it.
Suffer in silence
and get punched in the face. And it's like, no, you can't, use us, mm-hmm. And they were like, they cut the conversation. They didn't even want me in the thing. They just wanted me to listen. And like, this is the reason why I'm going to do this. Here's my action plan. This is what I'm going to do. It's mm-hmm. like, perfect. I'm right behind you,
Yeah.
And then, so what I could do then is run interference with the higher ups. Like, guys, these emails are going to come out. It may start a firestorm, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the reason why. And you have those conversations in person with, the people that you can, but then also follow up with email, copying the people, going back to, again, while this may come back from the client as a punch in the face, it's like, this is actually a time where we needed to stand up, and you position the employees as the ones who are making the right decisions, and you show that off enough, and it will start to build that psychological safety where you can have these direct feedback conversations with the people you manage and the people that are managing you, mm-hmm. where it starts to break down those imaginary silos of management versus non-management. It's a technique that worked for me. It may not work for everybody.
No, I think it's a fantastic approach. Yeah. Everyone needs to break that down.
Yeah. Yeah, because it really doesn't exist. I mean,
some organizations, unfortunately, it still does.
Oh, it does. But I guess, so it does. Yeah. So of course it exists. The culture exists, mm-hmm. but the actual, everybody's there to do a job. Right. And it's not like
either we're on the same team or we're not.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, there's no one job that's more special or less special than the other. Everybody needs everybody else to function and make this big, huge machine work. Mm-hmm. Right. And you can't have management if there's nobody to manage, right? So, if it's all managers and nobody doing the work, then the work gets done, right? So you need the people doing the work, and the people doing the work generally don't want to do all the crap we have to do as managers. They don't want to deal with it. They just want to do their thing, and that's perfect. And that's why you have management, right? Mm-hmm. And point is, it's like some people glorify management over one thing, but it's like, you can see now, especially in tech, I don't know how close you pay attention to tech, but it is almost normal now for the engineer level folks to get paid double what the management makes.
Oh, wow.
Just because of their expertise. Mm-hmm. Like, the thing I can think of right now is like hiring an AI engineer, right? Mm-hmm. Or machine learning or something. You can get maybe, 300, 400K, wow. if you're good. Their manager's going to get 150. It's just, it is what it is, right? Like, people are starting to realize, there's not a lot of, people find, they motivate themselves by the progression mm-hmm. of the organization. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to start off as an analyst. I'm going to move on to a manager position, and boom, and I'm going to keep going senior manager, vice president. That's where I want my trajectory to be, just because that's the framework that they see, and they also see that that's how, the compensation increases. Like, well, if I want to make X $100,000, I need to get up the chain, right? But now the pay, at least in tech, is starting to become much more, even insofar as like, well, an engineer who's good can make as much as or more than the management that manages them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Compensation is always a tricky one for me when I try to get people to understand, especially talking with a lot of people coming out of college or that are still in college, is, or even just talking to some high school students,
Yeah.
It's really going to be based on where's your value. I've seen a massive change into the value structure.
Yeah.
Where it's not that manager who's making less than his engineers is less valuable. The value he brings to the entire team, it's not to take away from it, but the value of that singular engineer and what they can do and how they can do it and the speed upon which they can do it too. I mean, if they're an AI engineer, that means they're probably using AI in what they're doing.
Sure, certainly.
They're probably powerhouses, right? And so their productivity level is probably the equivalent of 3 to 4 people.
Sure.
And so compensation matches that. On an opposite end of the spectrum, and the conversation's talking about the trades, we just talked about tech. Let's talk about trades. For these people coming in, is that communication, understanding that, listen, first off, AI is not going to steal the plumbing jobs.
No,
right
or
now.
HVAC.
Or HVAC. There's a lot of trades opportunities right now, and I don't know a single, and I actually made this comment the other day. I was talking to some friends from Canada. I said, in South Louisiana, HVAC, I don't know a single person who has their own HVAC company that's not pulling in well into the 6 figures.
Oh yeah, easy.
And they said, oh, it's even in Canada, those guys, they can pretty much name their price.
Yeah, heating. Gosh, can you
because
imagine?
of the heating.
Yeah.
Much less then also the coolers in the stores. I mean, commercial HVAC guys, it's so hard to get them. There's waiting for those guys, and I was like, that's really one of those moments where I was just like, I just live in a bubble sometimes, because in my mind, someone says HVAC, we're always hot, so it's hot 12 months of the year here. Like if we have a cold day, we're celebrating it.
Yeah.
I never even thought, well, in Canada, HVAC also includes heating. I just felt so dumb.
It's the H part of it.
And they were like, yeah, it's okay, Jonathan. We got it.
Yeah.
We got it. We understand. You mean well,
Yeah, no, I can't. Same. But
so I think that's a big part of that communication expectations in leveling out, right? I always called it leveling out. Like let's be realistic. Where do you think this falls? I thought it would be another thing interesting to bring up here in this conversation today is some of the, critical, I won't say it's just about the answers, but it's actually about the critical questions for that person in those scenarios, for them to understand the answers and actually have those questions answered. Yeah. Right. So when you talked about bringing in that group of people, and you kind of set the table of, this is how you guys get to the next level. This is how reviews are going to work. I'm not some crusty guy that's up on a shelf that's looking down on you, and I expect pinpoint answers, right? Yeah. That's part of the problem. So in the feedback, with the way I always capture this is, in the feedback, you should be answering these. If you're talking about from a supervisor or leadership role, you should be answering these questions. If you're not, and you're on the opposite end, you should be seeking answers for this, right? Going back to, if you think you should know, you should ask. If you think someone else should know, you should tell them, right? Right. Base principle for me. I use it all the time. And so the first one, let me just ask you, what do you think the first most important question that every employee needs answered?
What am I supposed to do?
Exactly. What's my job? And the number of times I've asked people, you see this all the time. What do you do? What's your job? And people do, you know what?
It's a good question.
That's a good question. I always joke and tell everybody, I do whatever I'm voluntold to do. Yeah. Yeah. But if you can't answer that for that person, here is your job. The next one is, how are you doing in your job? Right. Which is, how are you doing? I always laugh, and I've been mocked for quoting this. Okay. The number one question that Oprah got after every interview She said, this is the one question that everyone asks and everybody wants to know after an interview. Guess.
Oh, I don't know.
How'd I do?
Oh, how did I do? Yeah.
So, one, they want to know their job. It's the same for everyone. Then they want to know, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Is anybody seeing this?
Yeah.
Like, it kind of goes to that, does this matter? You know? Which is actually kind of the point. Does anybody care
Yeah.
if I show up today? I mean, we've all experienced it.
Sure.
You know, thinking, well, you know, if I call in sick today, I don't think anybody will notice.
Right.
So that's the beginning of it, is being able to give those very clearly in feedback or have those answered. And because that's a part of self-worth.
Right.
Truthfully. Some of the next ones kind of spread out sideways is like, well, how are we doing as a team? You know, are we winning? Are we losing? And I'm not going to deep dive into metrics here or anything, but because I feel like if any of the employees or anyone on the team doesn't know, that's a loss.
Yeah.
Like that's a missed opportunity. And I'm not talking about putting some KPIs up on the board. I'm talking about literally in communication. If people don't know how we're doing as a team, there's a big problem.
Yeah.
Because it's usually kind of like most things. If you're not talking about it, it's left to guesswork or it's left to the wrong assumption generally.
Right.
Where people think it's okay to do this because we're being profitable when maybe we're not.
Yeah.
I've seen that so many times. Well, why can't we get this? Well, apparently you missed the boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that last project is not going so well.
Yeah.
And so I always talk about how we're doing as a team and them understanding how we fit into that bigger picture. And every employee needs to know how they fit into the bigger picture. But every person on the team has to know that, right? Like where are we, what part of the wheel am I?
What value am I adding?
Exactly. That's the best way to say it. You said that perfectly. What value am I adding?
Yeah.
What value is our team adding?
Yeah.
You know, because it all boils down to one thing, going back to exactly what I said earlier, the quote from my friend Glenn was, you know, how do I help? Because at the end of all of those, if they've gotten those answers, they're geared, they're charged, and they're ready to help.
Yeah.
So if you're ready to ask them to do something new and you've answered all those questions, they're going to want to help. You know, that's the engagement piece. So I wouldn't say that these are all like coaching things. I would actually just say these are things that I use in conversation with coworkers.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used them. I've done consulting. And so you come in, they call you a seagull. You fly in, you drop on them and leave. But the reality is I'm trying to come in and I'm trying to engage. And I'm not anyone's boss. And I'm no one's direct employee potentially.
Right.
You're just trying to help. But if you take that mindset and you put it into someone who is nested in the company, you get the same results.
Yeah.
I've proven it so many times, and I've never had anyone tell me that it didn't work. And the only feedback I've gotten from people that was contrary was that this is hard.
It is hard. It's hard.
This is hard.
Yeah.
But every person that I follow up on, because I do my part and I follow up with that person because follow up, that's what makes this circle work.
Yeah.
Is they've told me that it's actually worth it because it's actually strengthened their relationships up, down, sideways.
Yeah.
Which that's what we're going for, right?
Yeah.
And then it creates exactly what you call it, you know, psychological safety in the space, because once you're able to have meaningful conversations about work and there's a structure to that conversation.
Yeah.
I've had more than one person tell me it transferred into the ability to have other types of conversation with them, and it transfers into their personal lives.
Yeah.
Of structuring these conversations with other people.
Yeah.
There's a reason some people are really good at communicating certain things and others are not. And that is called reps.
Yeah.
The more reps you get of
Right.
doing something you really don't want to do, the better you're going to get at it.
Right.
And the less chance.
Right.
So this is all this is about, is getting the reps and doing it. And the first time you do anything, it's awkward. You know, it's your first date. And so I remember I rolled out something with the team that I'm with now a year ago or something. And I said, well, you know, we've done a few iterations. We've made it now. This is only the third date. We don't have to stay together.
Right. Right.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And someone said, oh, the third date. Are we proposing? I said, I don't know what trajectory.
Yeah. That's
you're
not how
on.
I work.
That's not how it worked
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
It took a long time to get to a proposal standpoint. But I said, that's the beauty of these things, is you're never married to any one situation.
Right.
And so these are just tools in the toolbox. use them, they don't work, you try them for a duration, you still don't make progress, then pick up another tool. And that was really the genesis of how you and I got started talking about this, is how do we take things that are out there and turn them into things that people can use to actually help them?
Yeah.
Right? Help them get to the next level, help the people around them get to the next level, and go from being harvested to really growing. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. I think that so many people that I've spoken to just this past week, I don't know if you've gotten any comments or feedback from our last conversation. I mean, other than the fact, I've gotten some funny snipes made at me for that last conversation, but it was about the fact that what we're talking about here is actually things that people are thinking through. Mm-hmm. Like, people are actually thinking about these things. No one wants to be stagnant. No one wants to be at the bottom of the stack.
Correct.
In their profession, in their life. And turning things into tools that people can actually use is what's the whole purpose of getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sweetens the deal.
Sure. Yeah. So then trying to wrap this up in a sense, because we only got to maybe 2 bullet points of your.
No, we actually covered it.
Did we cover a bunch?
Yeah, we covered everything.
Oh, really? Oh, well, perfect. Is this going to be in your next newsletter? Because it probably should be.
It's going to be in one of them.
Okay.
It's going to be in one of them. I'm so behind. Like, I remember I talked last time about the recommendations. I'm still working on 2 of those that I owe some people. I'm working on the next 2 editions of the newsletter that still didn't go out yet. So I got to get some things rolling here.
You got to push it out, man.
I got to push it out.
The people are asking for it.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I wish they were. That would be cool too if they were actually asking for it. But no, I definitely need to get that done. And I just want to say thanks again for hosting me. It's really nice that we didn't wear the same color shirt today.
Oh, so yeah.
We don't look like we're going to Sadie Hawkins. That's nice.
Where did we? I didn't realize we were. I forgot.
Yeah.
So
I thought about it this morning. I was like, maybe I need to text him. I'm not sure.
So, no, well, I can tell you that I'm usually going to wear some sort of black or green because per AI, those are the colors that I'm supposed to wear on a video with a blue background.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Well, I went deep dive. I did a color swap on my skin tone. Mm-hmm. And then I said, okay, with this skin tone and with the color, these colors, I put them in hex, right?
Oh, okay.
And I have this accent color. Well, that accent color came from, a recommendation from AI too. So I was like, okay. So I always need to wear sage-ish to green, to not look to make the shirt neutral in the picture.
I think one of these we should just put a filter on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Where I look, I can be really old, or I could just have the baby's head.
That
Words of wisdom from a baby's head.
So you think you're giving more credit than I deserve. I don't know how to do that. I basically just take these videos and put them into a thing that merges them together. To put a filter on, that sounds sophisticated.
Yeah.
We need a teenager for that.
Good point. I'll find one.
Well, very good. Jonathan Hamlin, thank you very much. Your LinkedIn is just search up for Jonathan Hamlin, right?
Yeah, it's Jonathan Hamlin -USA, I think, is what I put for my actual LinkedIn.
Very good. Subscribe to the newsletter. Flipform Think Tank. You can find us on YouTube and anywhere else, I guess, social. So
absolutely. Next
time, what are we talking about? What do you want to do?
Next time, I'm thinking let's bring in somebody and let's have a conversation so we can get a third person for some opinions and ideas.
Okay.
I've got a friend that I want to bring in who has over 35 years working in almost every country.
Okay.
And working with every nationality. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to bring someone in and hear some different perspectives, right? Because I'm not trying to create an echo chamber for anybody.
Yeah.
Of, here's only you and I's perspective.
Sure. Yeah. The world according to John and JP.
So that's what I'm thinking for the next time. And so we'll kind of talk a little bit more in that scenario about how what we've discussed thus far feeds in when we start to talk about different types of scenarios, and how that's played out and what that looks like, because that person has also built multiple teams in multiple countries, deployed, in so many different crazy scenarios. He's got such great stories. And then we'll kind of start to use that as our next conversation, start talking about how these things feed a culture.
Okay.
And like most things, if you don't feed it, it kind of dies.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what we'll talk about, foreshadowing there is culture doesn't die. It just grows into something you did not want it to be.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate truth that we'll kind of unpack that.
It's kind of like you find something in the back of the fridge that's been there for months. It originally was an apple. It now has legs.
Exactly. So I thought that would be great for the next episode, and then shortly after that, we'll bring in another guest, and we'll start that conversation about the lies of leadership.
There you go. I like that one.
Yeah.
So awesome.
That was going to need a support group.
So awesome. Well, very good. Curiosity Sparks, Flipform Think Tank. Thank you all. Talk soon.